I woke to the sound of machines. It wasn't sudden, more like surfacing through layers of soft noise. Beeps, air pumps, a faint rhythm that matched my breathing. They told me it was February 2021, though I had no clear sense of time. The walls were pale green, the lights too bright. I could see my reflection in the monitor screen, thin, gray-skinned, a tube in my mouth. The nurse that week was new. Her name was Marisol. One afternoon, she adjusted the ventilator and said she needed to take a picture for the log. I nodded. The photo clicked. Later, she came back, uneasy, and told me she'd sent it to my emergency contact instead of records. My emergency contact was my son, Daniel. That night, he came by and smiled too quickly. He stayed 15 minutes and said he had calls to take. I watched him leave. Somewhere in the corridor, a cart rattled, and I drifted off again, unaware that a simple misdirected image had already started a quiet unraveling. The hospital room has become familiar in the way small spaces do when you have no choice but to inhabit them. Every detail had been committed to memory through sheer repetition. The pattern of scuff marks on the floor tiles near the door. The way the overhead light flickered slightly when the air conditioning kicked on. The particular squeak of the third wheel on the four stand. The smell of disinfectant mixed with something else, institutional food, maybe, or the particular staleness of recycled air. Evelyn Marks, 58 years old, former accountant, widowed for 6 years, lay in bed at St. Luke's recovery ward with a ventilator tube threaded through her mouth and down her throat. The tube was uncomfortable in ways she couldn't quite articulate, not painful exactly, but present. Always present. A foreign object invading her body, keeping her alive, but also reminding her constantly that she was dependent on machines. She had been there since early February, following a cardiac event that had left her unconscious for 3 days and dependent on machines for another 2 weeks. The doctors had explained it to her after she'd regained consciousness, a myocardial infarction, they called it. A heart attack. Significant damage to the left ventricle. She would need time to heal. She would need medications. She would need to make lifestyle changes. But first, she needed to breathe on her own again. The light that filtered through the window in the late afternoon had a flat, institutional quality. It was the kind of light that made everything look slightly washed out, slightly unreal. Outside, she could see a small slice of Chicago, the roofline of the building across the street, a water tower in the distance, the gray winter sky that seemed to stretch forever. Everything in the room was designed to be wiped clean. The floors were sealed linoleum in a mottled pattern meant to hide dirt. The rails were metal with a coating that could be disinfected. The surfaces were all hard plastic or laminate. Nothing soft except the blankets, which were thin and industrial, woven in a waffle pattern. Nothing personal except the small overnight bag her neighbor Helen had brought, containing a toothbrush still in its package, a plastic comb, a pair of slip-on shoes, and a change of clothes, soft pants, and a cardigan that now seemed impossibly complicated to put on. Evelyn had worked for 32 years at Morrison & Bradley, a mid-sized accounting firm housed in a brick building in downtown Chicago, near the river. She had started in 1989 as a junior bookkeeper, fresh out of community college, with an associate's degree in business administration. She had been 26 years old, newly married, and determined to build a stable life. The firm had been a good place to work. The partners were fair, if demanding. The clients were mostly small businesses, restaurants, retail shops, medical practices, people who needed someone to keep their books straight and handle their quarterly taxes. Evelyn had been good at it. She had a natural aptitude for numbers, for seeing patterns in columns of figures, for catching discrepancies that others might miss. She had worked her way up slowly and steadily. Junior bookkeeper to staff accountant to senior financial analyst. Each promotion had come with a small raise and a little more responsibility. She had never made a lot of money. Accountants at small firms rarely did, but it had been enough. Enough to buy a modest 2-bedroom condo in Rogers Park with Thomas. Enough to raise Daniel. Enough to save for retirement. Thomas had been a high school history teacher at Lane Tech. They had met at a community board meeting, something about zoning regulations. Neither of them could remember the specifics later and had struck up a conversation about property values and school funding. He had been funny and kind and steady. They had married 6 months later in a small ceremony at City Hall with just a handful of friends as witnesses. Daniel had been born a year after that. A healthy baby, 8 pounds 4 ounces, with Thomas's dark hair and Evelyn's serious eyes. They had named him after Thomas's grandfather, a detail that had meant more to Thomas than he'd ever quite been able to articulate. They had been a happy family, Evelyn thought. Not perfect, no family was, but happy enough. Thomas had coached Daniel's Little League team. Evelyn had helped with homework and school projects. They had taken modest vacations, camping in Wisconsin, a road trip to see the Grand Canyon, a weekend in Michigan. They had lived modestly, saved carefully, and never spent beyond their means. Thomas had died when Evelyn was 52. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in April and gone by September. 5 months from diagnosis to death. She remembered those months as a blur of hospital visits and insurance paperwork and trying to be strong for Daniel, who had been 27 at the time and struggling to process the loss of his father. After Thomas died, Evelyn had continued working for another 4 years. The routine had helped. The structure of having somewhere to be, something to do, numbers to reconcile and reports to prepare. But at 56, she had taken early retirement. The firm had offered a decent package, not generous, but decent, and she had her pension and Social Security coming soon and Thomas's life insurance payout carefully invested in a diversified portfolio. She had spent her retirement years quietly, reading library books, walking along the lakefront, taking a watercolor class at the community center, though she'd never been particularly artistic, volunteering at a local food bank once a week, managing her small investment portfolio with the same careful attention she had once applied to other people's finances. She had always been healthy. Her annual checkups had been unremarkable year after year. Blood pressure is normal. Cholesterol normal. Blood sugar is normal. Weight within the healthy range for her height. No concerning symptoms. No family history of heart disease. Both her parents had lived into their 80s, dying of old age more than any specific ailment, which made the heart attack on February 4th all the more unexpected. She had been in the produce section of the Jewel-Osco on Clark Street, reaching for a bag of Honeycrisp apples, when the pain had hit. Sharp and radiating, spreading across her chest like something breaking open. The sensation had been unlike anything she'd experienced before, not like indigestion or a muscle strain or anything familiar. This was different. This was catastrophic. Her left arm had gone numb. Her jaw had ached. She had felt suddenly nauseous and dizzy. She remembered dropping the bag of apples. She remembered hearing them thud against the floor. She remembered someone, a young woman with purple hair and concerned eyes, asking if she was okay. She remembered trying to say, "I think I need help," but not being sure if the words had actually come out. She remembered the floor coming up to meet her, the linoleum cold against her cheek. Then nothing. The next clear memory was 3 days later, waking to the sound of machines. A nurse, not Marisol, someone else, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, had been standing beside the bed, adjusting something. The nurse had noticed her eyes were open and had leaned closer, speaking slowly and clearly. "Miss Marks, you're in the hospital. You had a heart attack. You're on a ventilator to help you breathe. Try to stay calm. The doctor will be in soon to check on you." Evelyn had tried to nod, but couldn't move her head much. The tube in her throat had made it impossible to speak. She had felt panic rising. Where was she? What had happened? How long had she been here? Where was Daniel? But the nurse had gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know this is frightening, but you're safe. We're taking care of you. Just try to breathe normally and let the machine do the work." And so she had. Because what choice did she have? The days after that had blurred together in a haze of medication and discomfort and the relentless rhythm of the machines keeping her alive. She had learned the schedule quickly because it was the only way to mark time. Morning rounds at 7, when a team of doctors and residents would file in and discuss her case in medical terminology she only half understood. Breakfast at 8, delivered on a tray she couldn't eat from because of the tube. Physical therapy at 10, which at this stage meant a therapist moving her limbs passively while she lay in bed, keeping her muscles from atrophying. Lunch at noon. Afternoon check-ins from nurses, taking vitals, adjusting medications, changing 4 bags. Dinner at 6. Evening medications at 8. Lights dimmed at 9, though the machines never slept, never stopped their steady beeping and humming. Visitors were limited. Hospital policy during the pandemic, though by February 2021, restrictions had loosened slightly. Immediate family only. 1 visitor at a time. Masked and sanitized. Limited hours. Daniel came most days. Marisol Vega, 42, a single mother who had worked in the recovery ward for 11 years, moved through the room with the careful efficiency of someone who understood that every small action mattered. She had kind eyes, brown and warm, and tired hands with calluses on the palms from years of lifting patients, adjusting equipment, and sanitizing surfaces. She wore her hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her scrubs were a soft teal color that somehow made the clinical environment feel slightly more human. Marisol had 2 teenage daughters, 14 and 16, and an aging mother who lived in a small apartment in Pilsen. She worked 3 12-hour shifts per week, always Thursday through Saturday, and spent her off days managing the complicated schedules and needs of a multi-generational household. Homework help for the girls. Doctor's appointments for her mother. Grocery shopping. Laundry. Bills. The endless logistics of keeping a family functioning. She had been a nurse for 17 years, ever since graduating from community college with her RN degree at 25. She had started in pediatrics, moved to general medicine, and then landed in the recovery ward 11 years ago when a position had opened up. She liked the work, helping people through the vulnerable process of healing, seeing them gradually regain strength and independence. It was rewarding in a way that wasn't always obvious, but accumulated over time, like compound interest on a small investment. She had seen hundreds of patients come through this ward. Some recovered fully and went home. Some moved to long-term care facilities. Some didn't make it. She had learned early in her career not to get too attached, not to carry the weight of every story home with her. She needed to maintain professional boundaries for her own mental health. But there was something about Evelyn Marks that reminded Marisol of her own mother, the same quiet dignity, the same way of watching the world with careful, intelligent attention, the same sense of someone who had lived through hardship without becoming hard themselves. That Thursday afternoon, February 18th, 2 weeks into Evelyn's hospital stay, Marisol stood beside the ventilator, checking the readout on the control panel. The machine was a sophisticated piece of equipment, all digital displays and precise settings. The control panel showed multiple metrics: tidal volume set at 450 milliliters, respiratory rate at 14 breaths per minute, oxygen concentration at 40%, positive end expiratory pressure at 5 centimeters of water, peak inspiratory pressure hovering around 20. Everything was within normal parameters. The machine was functioning as it should. She pulled out her phone to photograph the display screen for the patient chart. It was standard protocol, visual documentation of ventilator settings at the start of each shift, especially for patients on extended ventilator support. The hospital had a secure digital system for storing these images, accessible only to medical staff, time-stamped and tagged with patient identification numbers. The process was simple. Open the hospital app, select the patient file, tap the camera icon, take the photo, and it would automatically upload to the patient's electronic medical record. Marisol had done it hundreds of times. "Mind if I take a picture for the log?" Marisol asked, glancing at Evelyn. Evelyn's eyes, the only part of her that could move freely, the only part that still felt entirely her own, blinked once slowly. That was all she could manage to indicate yes. Marisol angled the phone, making sure the control panel was centered in the frame. The afternoon light from the window was bright, creating a slight glare on the plastic display cover. She shifted her position slightly to avoid the reflection. The room was quiet except for the mechanical breathing of the ventilator and the steady beep of the heart monitor. She tapped the shutter button. The sound was soft, barely audible over the ambient noise. Click. She checked the image on her screen. The display was clear and legible, all the numbers visible. Good. She started to put the phone away, then paused. Something looked off. She pulled the phone back out and looked at the image more carefully. The control panel was fine, perfectly clear. But in the background, reflected in the window glass behind the ventilator, there was something. A figure. She squinted at the screen. It was the window's reflection, catching the room behind her. She could see the foot of the bed, part of the monitor, and what looked like a person standing near the wall. She frowned slightly. She must have been in the frame herself, or maybe another nurse had been in the room without her noticing. She dismissed the thought and slipped the phone back into her pocket. All set, she said, adjusting the 4-line that ran into Evelyn's left hand. The foresight looked good, no redness, no swelling. I'll be back in an hour to check your vitals. She gathered her clipboard and headed for the door, her shoes squeaking faintly on the linoleum floor. The hallway outside was busy with the familiar sounds of the ward phones ringing at the nurse's station, a medication cart rolling past, distant voices discussing patient updates, the overhead PA system paging doctors to different floors. Evelyn lay still after Marisol left, watching the afternoon light slowly track across the ceiling as the sun moved west. She had been in this room for 16 days now. She knew every detail of the ceiling, the arrangement of acoustic tiles, the pattern of tiny holes in each tile, the slight water stain in the far corner that looked vaguely like the outline of a cat. She knew the light patterns too. The morning light came in cold and blue. The afternoon light was warmer, golden. Evening light went pink and then gray and then disappeared entirely, leaving just the glow of the monitors and the fluorescent fixture above the door. She counted things to pass the time. Ceiling tiles. Beeps from the monitor. The number of times nurses came in. The number of breaths the ventilator took for her each minute. 14 breaths per minute. 60 minutes in an hour. 16 hours awake each day, roughly. That was 13,440 breaths the machine was taking for her each day. Breaths she wasn't taking herself. Breaths that kept her alive, but also reminded her constantly that her body had failed her. She thought about her life before. Her small condo with its view of the street. Her morning routine, coffee, newspaper, emails. Her afternoon walks along the lake. Her weekly volunteer shift at the food bank. Her bi-weekly phone calls with old colleagues from Morrison and Bradley. She thought about Daniel. About how often he'd called over the past few years. Not often. Maybe once a month, sometimes less. Always brief conversations. Always him asking how she was doing, her asking about his work, both of them skating along the surface of actual connection. She thought about how she'd given him money over the years. Small amounts, mostly. 1,000 here, 500 there. To help with startup costs for his contracting business. To cover a truck repair. To pay first and last month's rent when he'd moved apartments. She'd told herself it was what mothers did. They helped their children. They provided support. But Thomas was worried. You're enabling him, he'd said more than once. He's 30 years old. He needs to learn to stand on his own. He's trying, Evelyn had replied. He's working hard. He just needs a little help getting established. How long has he been getting established? Thomas had asked gently. 5 years? 7. Evelyn hadn't had a good answer to that. And now Thomas was gone, and Daniel was 33, and he still wasn't established. Still struggling. Still asking for help, though more subtly now. Mentioning bills he was worried about. Talking about opportunities that required just a little capital. Never quite asking directly, but making his needs known. And she kept helping. Because what else was a mother supposed to do? She closed her eyes and drifted in the space between sleep and wakefulness, aware of sounds, but not fully conscious. The ventilator's rhythm. The monitor's beeping. Footsteps in the hall. A phone rang. Someone is laughing. A cart rattling past. Somewhere during that drifting time, she became vaguely aware that someone had entered the room. Heavier footsteps. A man's stride. She couldn't see clearly with her eyes closed, couldn't turn her head easily with the tube, but she sensed a presence. Then she heard Marisol's voice, slightly surprised. "Oh, Mr. Marks. I didn't realize you were here. I didn't see you sign in at the nurse's station." "I just got here," a male voice replied. Daniel's voice. "I came straight to the room. Should I go back and sign in?" "It's okay. I can note it. Just next time, please check in at the desk first. It helps us track who's in the building." "Sure. Sorry about that." "No problem. I was just taking a photo for her chart. I'll let you visit." Footsteps leaving. The door is closing part way. Evelyn opened her eyes and saw Daniel standing near the foot of the bed, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He smiled when he noticed her eyes were open, but the smile came too quickly and didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Mom." An hour and a half later, Marisol returned to check vitals, and this time her expression was different. She approached the bed slowly, her hands clasped in front of her waist, her brow furrowed in the way people look when they've discovered a mistake they can't quite undo. She glanced toward the door as if checking that no one else was nearby, then spoke quietly, almost apologetically. "Miss Marks," she said, barely above a whisper. "I think I made a mistake. That photo I took earlier? One of the ventilator settings." She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I sent it to your emergency contact instead of the hospital records system." Evelyn stared at her, trying to process the words through the persistent fog of medication. Her mind felt slow, like moving through water or trying to run in a dream where your legs won't work properly. A photo. To her emergency contact. Why would that matter? Marisol continued, her voice apologetic. "Your son, Daniel. It went to his phone. I don't know exactly how it happened. The interface on the app can be confusing, and I must have tapped the wrong button when I was trying to upload it. I'm so sorry. I know patient privacy is important, and I shouldn't have." "It's fine," Evelyn tried to say, though with the tube the words came out as barely a whisper, rough and strained. Marisol seemed to hear the intention, if not the actual words. "I'll resend it properly. To the records system where it's supposed to go. I just wanted to let you know in case he mentions it. He might see it and wonder why he got a random hospital photo of medical equipment." She paused again, still looking uncomfortable. "I really am sorry. It was careless. I was rushing, and I should have double-checked before I hit send." Evelyn managed a small nod. It seemed like such a minor thing. A clerical error. A photo of a machine sent to the wrong recipient. These things happened in hospitals. Systems were complicated. People made mistakes. It didn't seem important. Marisol reached out and gently adjusted the blanket near Evelyn's shoulder, a small gesture of care. "I've been doing this job for 17 years and I've never sent patient information to the wrong place. I feel terrible about it." She checked the monitor, noted the readings on her clipboard: blood pressure 110/70, heart rate 72, oxygen saturation 98%, and left the room, still looking troubled. Evelyn closed her eyes again. The medication made her drowsy, pulled her towards sleep even when she didn't want to sleep. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of sounds and sensations, but not fully present. At some point during that drifting, she became aware that the room felt different. A shift in the air, maybe, or the sense of someone's presence. She opened her eyes and saw Daniel standing near the side of the bed, closer than before, looking at something on his phone. He noticed her watching and put the phone away quickly, smiling. "Hey, Mom. I didn't want to wake you. You were sleeping." Had she been sleeping? She wasn't sure. Time felt strange here. Elastic. Unreliable. "The nurse said you're doing better," Daniel continued, his voice carefully cheerful. "That's good. That's really good. The doctor said they might be able to take the tube out in a few days if you keep improving." Evelyn tried to nod. The tube made it difficult. Daniel pulled the visitor chair closer to the bed and sat down, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked tired, she noticed. Shadows under his eyes. His flannel shirt was wrinkled. His jeans had paint stains on the knees. "Work's been crazy," he said, as if she'd asked. "I picked up a couple of small jobs. Nothing major. Just enough to keep things moving. Actually, I'm hoping to land something bigger soon. There's this kitchen remodel in Evanston. A really nice project. Good money if it comes through. He glanced at the monitors, at the ventilator, at the stand. His eyes moved around the room, not quite settling on anything. You just need rest, he said, more to himself than to her. That's what everyone says. Rest and time. Your heart needs to heal. He stayed for 15 minutes, maybe 20. He checked his phone twice, scrolling through messages without really seeming to read them. He mentioned something about invoices that were overdue, a client who wasn't responding promptly, calls he needed to make later. His voice had the hurried, slightly distracted quality of someone who was already thinking about the next thing, already planning his exit. When he stood to leave, he leaned over the bed and touched her hand briefly. His palm was calloused and dry, the hands of someone who worked with tools and materials. I'll come by tomorrow, he said. Get some sleep, okay? He left without looking back, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft pneumatic hiss. Evelyn listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway. She heard the elevator chime somewhere in the distance. She heard the ongoing murmur of activity at the nurse's station, quiet voices, phones ringing, the shuffle of papers. Then the room settled back into its mechanical rhythm. The ventilator breathing for her. The monitor tracking her heart. The force slowly dripped medication into her bloodstream. She stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the unease that had settled in her chest. Something about Daniel's visit had felt off. The way he'd looked at the machines. The way he'd avoided making sustained eye contact. The way he'd mentioned rest and time with a tone that felt less like encouragement and more like... What? Impatience? Calculation. She told herself she was imagining things. The medication was making her paranoid. The vulnerability of being intubated and bedridden was making her see threats where there were none. Daniel was her son. He visited every day. He was concerned about her. That was all. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but the unease remained, a small weight pressing against her ribs. Somewhere during the night, she wasn't sure exactly when, time had no meaning in the constant artificial light and medication haze, an automated notation was added to the hospital's electronic monitoring system. The ventilator, like all critical equipment, was connected to a central monitoring system that tracked everything. Every breath was delivered. Every pressure changes. Every alarm. Every power fluctuation. The system logged it all automatically, creating a minute-by-minute record of the machine's operation. At 14 hours, 37 minutes and 9 seconds, 2:37 p.m. and 9 seconds, in civilian time, the system recorded an event. Unit ID, Vent, 12-247B. Event type, power interruption. Timestamp, February 18, 2021, 14:37 and 9 seconds. Duration, 9 seconds. Battery backup, engaged. Ventilation status, maintained. Restoration, automatic, 14 hours, 37 minutes and 18 seconds. Patient impact, none. Alert status, low priority. Maintenance flag, review recommended. The entry was filed automatically in the maintenance database, flagged for weekly review by the Biomedical Engineering Department. No alarm had sounded because the backup systems had functioned exactly as designed. The ventilator had switched seamlessly to battery power, maintained ventilation throughout the interruption, and restored to main power when it became available again. From the system's perspective, this was a successful demonstration of redundancy protocols. From a patient safety perspective, it was noted but not concerning. No immediate action was required. The night shift nurses, busy with their rounds and medication schedules, didn't review the maintenance logs. They had patients to check on, vital signs to record, IVs to change, call buttons to answer. The maintenance database was something the day shift administration dealt with during regular business hours. So the notation sat in the system, time-stamped and documented, waiting to be noticed. By the third week, February was edging toward March. The days were imperceptibly longer, the quality of light through the window shifting subtly as winter began its slow retreat toward spring. Evelyn could feel the change even from her hospital bed, the angle of the sun, the color of the sky visible through the window, the way the light moved across the room throughout the day. The tube came out on February 24th. The procedure was straightforward but uncomfortable. A doctor, a respiratory therapist, and 2 nurses all gathered around the bed. The doctor explained what would happen. They would deflate the cuff that sealed the tube in her windpipe, ask her to take a deep breath and cough, and pull the tube out quickly in one smooth motion as she exhaled. "It will feel strange," the doctor said, "but it will be over in seconds." They deflated the cuff. Evelyn felt the change in pressure, the slight shift in how the tube sat in her throat. "Okay, take a deep breath and cough for me," the respiratory therapist instructed. Evelyn tried. The cough was weak and painful, her throat raw from having the tube in place for 3 weeks. "Good. Again. Deep breath and cough." She coughed harder this time, and as she did, the doctor pulled. The tube slid out of her throat in one continuous motion, and suddenly she was breathing through her own mouth and nose. No tube, no machine, just air. The sensation was overwhelming. Her throat burned. Her voice was gone. But she was breathing on her own. They gave her oxygen through a nasal cannula, small tubes in her nostrils, and monitored her carefully for the next hour. Her oxygen saturation stayed high. Her breathing was steady. Her body remembered how to do this on its own. "Try not to talk too much for the first day or 2, the doctor said. "Your vocal cords need time to recover." They've been immobile for 3 weeks. But Evelyn couldn't help herself. After 3 weeks of silence, even the simplest word felt like a gift. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible and rough as sandpaper. A nurse brought her a cup with a straw. The water was cold and painful going down her raw throat, but she drank it slowly, grateful for every sensation. Over the next few days, her strength began to return in small, measurable increments. She could sit up with assistance, though her back and core muscles were weak from disuse. She could turn her head without the tube restricting movement. She could drink liquids and, gradually, eat soft foods, applesauce, pudding, mashed potatoes, soup. The physical therapist came twice a day now. His name was Marcus, a young man with an optimistic energy that bordered on annoying, but was ultimately helpful. He helped her move her legs more actively now, bending her knees, rotating her ankles, flexing and pointing her toes. "We need to keep the circulation going," he explained. "Prevent blood clots. Get your muscles remembering what they're supposed to do." By the end of the week, she was standing with support. Marcus and a nurse on either side, gripping her arms as she shifted her weight onto legs that felt impossibly weak and unsteady. "That's it," Marcus encouraged. "Just stand for now. Don't try to walk yet. Just feel your feet on the ground." She stood for 30 seconds, then 60, then 90. Her legs trembled. Her heart rate increased. But she stood. By the start of the 4th week, she was taking steps. Slow, careful, supported steps, but steps nonetheless. From the bed to the chair. From the chair to the door. From the door to the window. Each journey felt monumental. Daniel's visits grew shorter during this time. He came 3 times that week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, always in the late afternoon, always carrying a folder or a large manila envelope. He seemed more distracted than usual, checking his phone frequently, glancing at his watch, mentioning meetings and calls that pulled him away. On Tuesday, he arrived with a stack of papers clipped together with a large black binder clip. He set them on the rolling tray table beside her bed without ceremony. "Mom, I need you to sign some things," he said, pulling a pen from his jacket pocket. Evelyn looked at the papers. They were printed on plain white office paper, no official letterhead, no law firm watermark, no corporate seal. Just dense blocks of text in what looked like a standard word processing font. The top page had a header that read "Authorization for Financial Management," followed by several paragraphs of small print text. "What are they?" she asked. Her voice was still weak, still hoarse, but at least she could speak now. "Authorization forms," Daniel said, his tone casual and matter-of-fact. "So I can handle your bills while you're here. You know, utilities, insurance, credit cards. Stuff that needs to be paid on time. You don't want late fees piling up while you're recovering." He held the pen out toward her expectantly. Evelyn reached for the papers, intending to read them, but Daniel was already pointing to signature lines at the bottom of the pages. Here, here, and here, he said, indicating 3 separate pages. Just your signature and the date. That's all it needs. What exactly am I authorizing? She asked, trying to focus on the text. The words swam slightly in front of her eyes. The medication still affected her cognitive processing, making it harder to concentrate. Just bill payments, Daniel said smoothly. Everything's digital now anyway. I already have access to your email, so I can see what bills are coming in. This just gives me legal authorization to pay them from your accounts. I thought my bills were on autopay, Evelyn said slowly. Most of them are. But not all. And sometimes there are irregular expenses. Medical bills. Special assessments from the condo association. That kind of thing. This just makes it easier for me to handle everything so you don't have to worry. He was still holding the pen out. I'd like to read them first, Evelyn said. Daniel's expression flickered, just for a moment, something that might have been impatience or frustration, but then smoothed back into pleasant neutrality. Of course, he said, setting the pen down on the tray table. Take your time. I just need them back by tomorrow so I can get everything processed. The electric company has a form deadline on Friday, and I need your authorization on file before I can make changes to the billing. That didn't sound quite right to Evelyn, but she was too tired to pursue it. I'll look at them tonight. Great. Thanks, Mom. He stayed another 10 minutes, scrolling through his phone, telling her about a friend who'd gotten a new job, about traffic on the Kennedy, about the weather forecast calling for snow later in the week. Then he said he had a meeting and left. After he was gone, Evelyn reached for the papers and pulled them closer, adjusting the bed so she could sit up more fully. She read slowly, her eyes struggling to focus on the small print. The language was formal and legalistic, full of phrases like, hereby authorize and grant full access and empower the designated agent. As she read, she felt her unease growing. The first page granted temporary financial management authority to Daniel Marks, allowing him to access, review, and manage all financial accounts in Evelyn's name. The second page went further, authorizing him to make withdrawals, transfers, and payments as deemed necessary for the maintenance and protection of the principal's assets and obligations. The third page included language about full authority to act as financial representative with no restrictions or oversight requirements. This wasn't just authorization to pay bills. This was giving him complete control of her finances. She set the papers aside without signing them. That night, she lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about those papers. Thinking about the vague language. Thinking about how Daniel had tried to rush her into signing them without reading them carefully. She thought about the condo. Paid off. Worth perhaps $300,000. She thought about her retirement accounts. The IRA and 401k rolled over from Morrison and Bradley, worth about $400,000 last time she checked. She thought about her savings. About $50,000 in a high-yield account, another $30,000 in checking. She thought about Thomas's life insurance policy. $50,000, with her as primary beneficiary and Daniel as contingent beneficiary. She added it up in her head. If something happened to her, if she died, Daniel would inherit approximately $780,000. It was a thought she didn't want to have, a dark, ugly thought that felt like a betrayal of the bond between mother and son. But she had it anyway. And once she'd had it, she couldn't unhave it. The next day, Wednesday, Marisol came in during the afternoon shift. She was checking Evelyn's vitals, blood pressure cuff inflating and deflating around her arm, thermometer under her tongue, pulse oximeter clipped to her finger, when another nurse appeared in the doorway. The other nurse was older, perhaps in her late 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. Her name tag read Sandra Kowalski, RN. Charge nurse. She had the bearing of someone who'd been doing this job for decades and had seen everything at least twice. Marisol, did you file that alert from last Thursday? Sandra asked without preamble, consulting a clipboard in her hands. Marisol looked up from the blood pressure cuff, her brow furrowing slightly. Which alert? Ventilator power interruption. Room 247B. February 18th. Marisol thought for a moment. Oh, right. Yeah, I noted it in the shift log. The machine auto-restored. The patient wasn't affected. Sandra nodded, making a note on her clipboard. Okay. Maintenance wants to check the outlet. They're coming by later this week. Did you observe anything unusual when it happened? I wasn't in the room when it happened, Marisol said. I just saw the notation in the system later. It was during the afternoon. The machine handled it fine, switched to battery backup, and restored automatically. Do we know what caused it? Sandra asked. The system says undetermined. Could have been a building power fluctuation. Could have been someone bumping the cord. The outlet might be loose. Sandra glanced at Evelyn. You had a visitor that afternoon, right? Your son. Evelyn's heart rate increased. The monitor beside her bed responded with a slightly faster series of beeps. Marisol noticed immediately, her attention shifting to the monitor. Your heart rate just jumped. Are you okay? Are you in pain? I'm fine, Evelyn said quickly, her voice still rough and quiet. Just tired. Sandra made another note on her clipboard. We'll have maintenance check everything. Better safe than sorry, she moved on, her shoes squeaking down the hallway toward the next patient room. Marisol finished recording the blood pressure reading, 118/76, and heart rate, now back down to 78, and was about to leave when Evelyn spoke. What was that about? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Marisol hesitated, clearly weighing how much to explain. Nothing to worry about. The ventilator had a brief power interruption last week. 9 seconds. The backup battery worked like it's supposed to. You were never without ventilation. When exactly? Evelyn asked, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. Last Thursday, February 18th. Around 2:30 in the afternoon. Evelyn thought back, trying to remember. February 18th. That had been the day Marisol took the photo. The day the photo was sent to Daniel. The day he had visited. Do you remember what time you took that picture? Evelyn asked carefully. The one he sent to my son by mistake. Marisol pulled out her phone from her scrub's pocket and scrolled through her camera roll. Let me check the timestamp. She found the image and tapped on it to bring up the details. February 18th. 2:37 p.m. Why? Evelyn's mouth went dry. And the power alert was at 2:37. Marisol's expression changed. She looked at her phone again, then at Evelyn, something dawning in her eyes. The maintenance log says 14:37. Yes, that's 2:37 p.m. They looked at each other for a long moment. Was my son here at that time? Evelyn asked. Marisol thought about it. I think so. I'd have to check the visitor log. But I remember seeing him in the room when I came in to take the photo. He was standing near the foot of your bed. The cold feeling in Evelyn's chest intensified. Can you check the log? Can you tell me exactly when he signed in and when he left? I can look, Marisol said slowly. But why? What are you thinking? I don't know yet, Evelyn said. I just want to understand the timing. Marisol nodded, though she looked concerned. I'll check and let you know. She left the room, but her movements were slower, more thoughtful than usual. After she was gone, Evelyn lay in bed and stared at the machines that surrounded her. The force stand, the heart monitor, the oxygen tank, the place where the ventilator had been, now empty space. She thought about the power interruption. 9 seconds. At the exact moment a photograph was being taken. At the exact moment Daniel had been in the room. She thought about the authorization papers he'd brought. The ones trying to give him complete control of her finances. She thought about $780,000. She thought about how much easier his life would be if she weren't here. No. She pushed the thought away. It was too dark. Too horrible. Daniel was her son. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But the cold feeling in her chest remained. That evening, Daniel returned. He came with the folder again, this time setting it on the windowsill instead of immediately presenting it to her. He seemed more relaxed tonight, less hurried. He pulled the visitor chair close to the bed and sat down, stretching his legs out. How are you feeling? He asked. Better, Evelyn said. Walking a little more each day. That's great. Really great, he smiled at her, and for a moment he looked like the boy she remembered, her son at 10, at 15, at 20. Before the financial struggles. Before the failed businesses. Before the constant need for help. "So, did you get a chance to look at those papers?" he asked, his tone casual. "I did. And? I'm not going to sign them." His expression shifted, the easy smile tightening slightly. "Why not?" "Because I already have someone managing my affairs. Helen. She has power of attorney. We set that up years ago." "Helen." Daniel said the name like he'd forgotten who she was, though Evelyn knew he remembered perfectly well. "Your neighbor." "Yes. Mom, Helen doesn't know all your accounts. She doesn't have your passwords. She doesn't know how to access your online banking." "She does now," Evelyn said calmly. "I gave her everything this week." Daniel stared at her, his body going very still. "When did you do that?" "Monday. I called her and walked her through accessing everything." "Why?" "Because I needed someone I could trust to handle things while I'm recovering." The words hung in the air between them. Someone I could trust. The implication was clear. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't trust me?" "I didn't say that." "You just implied it." He leaned forward in his chair, his voice taking on an edge. "I'm your son. I'm trying to help you. All I wanted was to make sure your bills got paid while you're in here." "My bills are being paid," Evelyn said. "Helen is handling it. Helen has her own life. Her own problems. She shouldn't have to deal with your finances." She volunteered. "She's happy to help." Daniel stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. He grabbed his keys from the side table, his movements jerky and agitated. "Fine. Whatever. If that's what you want." "It is." He moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "You know what? I've been coming here every day. Taking time off work I can't afford to lose. Trying to support you. And this is the thanks I get?" "I appreciate you visiting," Evelyn said quietly. "But I need to make my own decisions about my finances." "Fine," he said again. He started to leave, then paused one more time. His hand was on the door handle. "Did someone tell you not to sign those papers?" "Helen." "No one told me anything. I read them myself and made my own decision." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he left, the door swinging shut with more force than necessary. Evelyn lay in the quiet room afterward, her heart rate elevated, breathing shallow. The confrontation had exhausted her more than any physical therapy session. But she had done it. She had set a boundary. She had protected herself. And she knew, with cold certainty, that she had made the right decision. That night, she barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made her tense. Every shadow that passed by her door made her wonder if Daniel had come back. She knew it was irrational. He wouldn't do anything here, in the hospital, with nurses and cameras and security, but the fear was there anyway, primal and persistent. By morning, she had made a decision. She was going to find out exactly what had happened on February 18th at 2:37 p.m. And she was going to protect herself, no matter what she discovered. By late February, the air had changed. Spring wasn't here yet, but winter was loosening its grip. Evelyn could sense it even from inside the hospital, something about the quality of light, the way the sun lingered a few minutes longer each evening, the pale gold color of afternoon instead of the flat gray of deep winter. Helen Porter arrived on Saturday afternoon with flowers and purpose. She was 61 years old, a retired librarian with silver haircut in a practical bob and sharp hazel eyes that missed very little. She wore sensible clothes, dark slacks, a cream sweater, comfortable walking shoes, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades organizing information and solving problems. She had lived next door to Evelyn for 12 years now. They had become friends gradually, the way neighbors do when they share a wall and similar schedules and a mutual respect for boundaries. Coffee on Sunday mornings in one apartment or the other. Shared dinners on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Emergency keys kept in each other's kitchen drawers. The comfortable friendship of two women who had both lost their husbands and learned to build lives alone. When Thomas died, Helen had been there. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, just present. Bringing casseroles. Handling phone calls when Evelyn couldn't face talking to people. sitting quietly in the living room while Evelyn cried. The kind of friendship that showed up in practical ways. When Evelyn had updated her estate plan 6 years ago, after Thomas's death, she had asked Helen to be her power of attorney. Not because Helen was family, she had no family except Daniel, but because Helen was trustworthy, organized, and sensible. Helen had agreed immediately, and they had spent an afternoon at Evelyn's kitchen table going through all the important documents. Bank accounts and passwords. Investment accounts and beneficiaries. Insurance policies and contact information. The location of the will. The location of the safe deposit box key. Medical directives. Funeral preferences. All of it written down, copied, organized into folders. Helen kept her copy in a fireproof safe in her bedroom closet, labeled simply Evelyn. Now she came to the hospital with a small vase of tulips, yellow and white, cheerful against the institutional walls, and a leather portfolio folder under her arm. "I've been managing your mail," Helen said after she'd set the flowers on the windowsill and pulled the visitor chair close to the bed. "Mostly junk. Credit card offers. Grocery store circulars. A notice from the condo association about spring landscaping." "Thank you," Evelyn said. Her voice was stronger now, though still raspy. "But I also logged into your bank account." To make sure the mortgage payment cleared, Helen's expression shifted slightly and became more serious. "There's something you need to see." She opened the portfolio and pulled out several printed pages. Bank statements. Transaction histories. Highlighted sections in yellow and pink. There were 2 transfers, Helen said, handing the first page to Evelyn. Both to Daniel. Each for $5,000. Both marked as care services. Evelyn took the paper with hands that had started to tremble slightly. She looked at the highlighted transactions. February 9, 2021, electronic transfer. Daniel Mark's account ****4723 $5,000.00. Memo. Care Services, Week 1. February 16, 2021, electronic transfer. Daniel Mark's account ****4723 $5,000.00. Memo. Final payment. She stared at the words. Final payment. As if something had been concluded. As if a transaction had been completed. "He said he was paying utilities," Evelyn said slowly, her voice barely audible. Helen handed her another sheet. "These are your utility bills from January and February. All paid automatically through your checking account, just like always. Electric, gas, water, internet, cable. Nothing overdue. Nothing changed. Total utilities for both months combined, $642. Evelyn looked at the numbers. $642 in utilities. $10,000 transferred to Daniel. The math didn't work. Then why? She couldn't finish the sentence. "Look at the memo on the second transfer," Helen said quietly. Final payment. Evelyn read it again and again. Final payment. Final payment for what? Care services. What care services? She'd been in a coma for the first 3 days. Then intubated and sedated. She hadn't hired anyone to provide care. Daniel hadn't been providing care in any official capacity. He'd just been visiting. So, what was the final payment for? Unless he'd thought there wouldn't be any more payments needed. Unless he'd thought this would be the last one. No. She pushed the thought away, but it kept coming back, insistent and horrible. "Helen," Evelyn said, her voice shaking now. "I need you to pull all the transactions from the last 6 months. Everything. I need to see the full pattern." Helen nodded. "I already did." She handed over more pages. "I thought you might want to see." Evelyn took the pages and spread them out on the rolling table, organizing them chronologically. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear, sharp in the way it used to be when she was working at Morrison and Bradley, tracking financial irregularities for audits. September, $600 withdrawal, memo, truck repair. October, $800 withdrawal, memo, business supplies. November, $1,500 withdrawal, memo, loan repayment. December, no transactions. January, $3,000 withdrawal, memo, equipment purchase. February 9th, $5,000 transfer, memo, care services, week 1. February 16th, $5,000 transfer, memo, final payment. Total, $16,900 in 6 months. But that wasn't what made Evelyn's chest tighten. It was the pattern. Small amounts at first, growing larger. Then 2 big transfers while she was incapacitated, unable to authorize or question them. And that memo. Final payment. Did he ever pay any of it back? Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Helen confirmed. No deposits from him. No transfers back in. Only withdrawals and transfers. Evelyn thought about her total assets. The condo paid off, worth approximately $300,000. The retirement accounts, last valued at around $400,000. Savings and checking, about $80,000 combined. Thomas's life insurance policy, $50,000, with Daniel as contingent beneficiary if she died. $830,000. Her entire estate. All set to go to Daniel if something happened to her. Helen, Evelyn said quietly. There's something else I need to tell you. She explained about the ventilator alert. The power interruption. The timing. The photograph Marisol had taken. Daniel's presence in the room at that exact moment. Helen listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Evelyn finished, Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to see that photograph," Evelyn said. "I want to see exactly what it shows. And I want to get copies of everything, the bank records, the ventilator logs, the visitor records. I want documentation." "Why?" Helen asked gently. "What are you thinking?" Evelyn met her eyes. "I'm thinking I need to protect myself. And I'm thinking I need to understand exactly what happened on February 18th at 2:37 p.m. Helen nodded slowly. "I'll help you. Whatever you need. I need you to change all my passwords. Every account. Bank, investment, credit cards, email, everything. Lock him out. Consider it done. And I need you to take over as primary power of attorney. Not just healthcare. Everything. Financial, legal, all of it." "Okay." And Evelyn hesitated, the words difficult to say out loud. "I need to talk to my attorney about updating my will." Helen understood what she wasn't saying. Understood that Evelyn was considering removing Daniel as her beneficiary. Understood that this was about more than just financial management. This was about survival. "I'll call Margaret Sullivan on Monday," Helen said. Margaret was the attorney who had handled Evelyn's estate planning after Thomas died. "We'll set something up." They spent the next hour going through everything systematically. Helen took notes in her precise librarian's handwriting, making lists and timelines and action items. Bank accounts to secure. Passwords to change. Documents to request. People to contact. By the time she left, Evelyn felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. Frightened but focused. She had a plan. She had an ally. She had documentation. She wasn't helpless anymore. That night, lying in the dark with only the glow of the monitors for light, Evelyn thought about her son. About the baby she'd held in her arms 33 years ago. The toddler who'd learned to walk holding her fingers. The kindergartner with his Star Wars lunchbox. The teenager who'd been moody and difficult, but still her child. The young man who'd struggled to find his place in the world. At what point had he changed? Or had he always been this way and she just hadn't seen it? She thought about all the times she'd made excuses for him. All the times she'd given him money she couldn't quite afford. All the times Thomas had expressed concern and she'd defended Daniel. He's just going through a hard time. He's trying, he just needs help getting established. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't help my own son? She thought about how often people used love as a weapon. How often family became the excuse for exploitation. How often mothers were expected to give endlessly, sacrificially, without limit or boundary. She thought about the authorization papers Daniel had tried to get her to sign. The ones that would have given him complete control of her finances. And she realized, if she had signed them, if she'd been just a little more trusting or a little more confused from the medication, he would have had legal authority to do anything he wanted with her money. Empty her accounts. Sell her condo. cash out her retirement funds. And if something had happened to her, if that power interruption had lasted longer than 9 seconds, if the battery backup had failed, if she died while he had that authorization, no one would have questioned it. He would have been the grieving son, the authorized agent, the legal heir, managing his mother's affairs during a tragic medical emergency. It would have been perfect. The thought made her nauseated. She pressed the call button. A nurse came in, not Marisol, someone from the night shift. "I can't sleep," Evelyn said. "Can I have something?" The nurse checked her chart, consulted with the doctor on call, and returned with a small pill. Lorazepam, 0.5 milligram. For anxiety. Evelyn took it and waited for the softening of her thoughts, the chemical distance from her fear. Eventually, she slept. Sunday morning brought Marisol back for her shift. She came into the room during morning rounds looking tired but determined. She waited until the doctors had finished their examination and left before approaching Evelyn's bed. "I checked the visitor log," she said quietly, pulling a small notebook from her pocket. "February 18th. Your son signed in at 1:45 p.m. He signed out at 3:15 p.m. Evelyn did the mental math. 1:45 to 3:15. An hour and a half. And the power interruption had happened at 2:37. Right in the middle of his visit. "And the photo?" Evelyn asked. "You said you took it at 2:37. "Yes. I have it on my phone. Do you want to see it?" "Please." Marisol pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and scrolled through her camera roll. She found the image and turned the screen toward Evelyn. The photo showed the ventilator's control panel in sharp detail. The digital display was clear and legible, all the settings visible: tidal volume, respiratory rate, oxygen concentration, pressure levels. The machine itself was in the center of the frame. But behind the machine, reflected in the window glass, was a figure. Evelyn leaned closer, squinting at the small phone screen. The reflection wasn't perfectly clear. The window glass had caught the afternoon light at an angle, creating some glare and distortion, but it was clear enough. A man. Tall. Wearing what looked like a flannel shirt. Standing near the foot of the bed, slightly to the left. And his arm was extended. His hand was positioned near the base of the ventilator, right where the power cord connected to the outlet on the wall. Evelyn could see the angle of his arm, the position of his body, the way his hand was placed. His thumb and forefinger appeared to be touching something. The plug, maybe. Or the socket. Or the space between them. The position was too specific to be accidental. Too deliberate to be a casual gesture. "Can you email that to me?" Evelyn asked, her voice very quiet. "The photo?" "Yes." "Send it to my email address. And also, can you save it somewhere secure? Back it up? I don't want it to get lost." Marisol looked at her carefully. "What are you thinking, Miss Marks?" Evelyn chose her words carefully. "I'm thinking that the photograph shows my son's hand near the power connection at the exact moment the ventilator lost power. And I'm thinking that's not a coincidence." Marisol's expression shifted. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by concern. "Are you saying? Do you think he deliberately unplugged it?" "I don't know what I think yet," Evelyn said. "But I want to have documentation. Just in case." Marisol nodded slowly. "I already backed up my photos to the cloud. It's saved in 3 places: my phone, my laptop, and Google Photos. And I can email it to you right now if you give me your address." Evelyn recited her email address, spelling it out carefully. Marisol typed it into her phone and hit send. "Done," she said. "Check your email when you get a chance." "Thank you," Evelyn said. "And Marisol, I know this is complicated. I know you're in a difficult position. But I'm grateful you're paying attention." "I'm a nurse," Marisol said simply. "Patient safety is literally my job. If something happened that shouldn't have happened, I need to know about it." After Marisol left, Evelyn used the hospital's guest Wi-Fi to access her email on her phone. She found the message from Marisol and downloaded the attachment. The photo loaded on her screen, and she zoomed in on the reflection in the window. Daniel's figure, distorted slightly by the angle and the glass, but unmistakably him. His hand near the plug. At 2:37 p.m. The exact moment of the power failure. She saved the photo to her phone, then forwarded it to Helen with a message. "This is what I was telling you about. Save this somewhere safe." Then she called Dr. Nathan Cole's office and left a message asking for copies of any equipment logs or maintenance reports related to her ventilator during her hospital stay. By Monday afternoon, she had an appointment scheduled for a video call with Margaret Sullivan, her attorney, for Tuesday at 2 p.m. By Tuesday morning, Helen had changed every password on every account Evelyn owned. By Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn was on a video call with Margaret, explaining everything. Margaret Sullivan was 63 years old, a solo practitioner who specialized in estate planning, elder law, and asset protection. She had gray hair cut in a professional style, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the calm, measured demeanor of someone who had heard every possible family horror story and was no longer surprised by anything. Helen had set up the video call on her tablet, propping it up on the rolling table beside Evelyn's hospital bed. Margaret's face appeared on screen, her office visible behind her, bookshelves full of legal texts, framed diplomas on the wall, a window showing the downtown Chicago skyline. "Evelyn," Margaret said warmly. "I'm glad to see you're recovering. Helen filled me in on some of the situation, but I'd like to hear it from you. Walk me through what's been happening." Evelyn took a breath and began. She explained the heart attack, the hospitalization, the intubation, Daniel's visits, the authorization forms he'd tried to get her to sign, the financial transfers Helen had discovered, the ventilator power failure, the photograph, the timing that aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. Margaret listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When Evelyn finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "First question," Margaret said. "Do you feel safe? Are you in immediate danger?" "I'm in a hospital," Evelyn said. "There are nurses and monitors and security. I think I'm safe here." "Good." "Second question, what do you want to happen? What's your goal here?" Evelyn had thought about this. "I want to protect myself. I want to make sure he can't access my finances or make decisions about my medical care. I want to secure my assets so that if something happens to me, it goes where I want it to go. And she hesitated. "I want to understand what actually happened on February 18th. "Okay," Margaret said. "Let's talk about what we can do right now to protect you legally and financially. Then we can discuss whether you want to pursue any other action." Over the next hour, they worked through options. Immediate actions. Revoke Daniel's status as authorized user on all bank accounts. Helen had already done this. Execute a new durable power of attorney naming Helen Porter as agent for all matters, financial and healthcare. Execute a new advance directive specifying medical treatment preferences and decision-makers. Update the will to remove Daniel as beneficiary. Change beneficiary designations on all retirement accounts and life insurance policies. Add Helen as joint owner on the checking account for immediate access to funds. Protective measures. File a notarized affidavit documenting the circumstances, with supporting evidence, to be held by Margaret's firm. Request formal documentation from the hospital regarding the ventilator incident. Consider placing a fraud alert on credit reports. Consider changing phone numbers and email addresses to reduce unwanted contact. Potential further actions. Report the unauthorized financial transfers to the bank for investigation. File a police report for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Report the potential medical equipment tampering to hospital security and state health authorities. Seek a restraining order if necessary. "I can have the power of attorney and advance directive documents prepared today," Margaret said. "I can arrange for a mobile notary to come to the hospital tomorrow to witness your signatures. The update will take a few more days to draft properly, but I can have that ready by the end of the week." "What about the financial transfers?" Evelyn asked. "He took $10,000 without my permission." "That's theft," Margaret said bluntly. "Or at minimum, financial exploitation. The fact that he was an authorized user on the account complicates things, but the fact that you were incapacitated at the time and the transfers were marked with misleading memos gives you grounds to pursue recovery." "Would I have to press charges? Testify against him?" "Not necessarily. You could report it to the bank and let them investigate. If they determine the transactions were unauthorized, They may reverse them and handle any criminal referral themselves. Or you could file a civil suit to recover the funds without involving criminal charges. Evelyn thought about it. The idea of testifying against her own son, of sitting in a courtroom and accusing him publicly, made her feel ill. But the idea of letting him keep money he'd stolen from her while she was unconscious made her angry. "Let me think about that part," she said. "Can we start with the protective documents first?" "Absolutely. I'll have everything ready for you to sign tomorrow." And Evelyn, "Yes. I want you to know that what you're describing, the pattern of financial exploitation, the pressure to sign authorization documents while you were vulnerable, the presence near medical equipment at the moment of a malfunction, these are serious concerns. You're doing the right thing by protecting yourself." After the call ended, Evelyn felt both relieved and emotionally exhausted. She had taken action. She had legal support. She was no longer just reacting. But she also felt the weight of what she was doing. She was legally cutting her son out of her life, removing him from her will, blocking his access to her money, treating him as a threat rather than family. Part of her felt guilty about it. What kind of mother does this to her own child? But another part of her, the part that had seen the photograph, that had read the words "final payment," that had felt the cold reality of being vulnerable and alone in a hospital bed, knew this was survival. Love couldn't trump self-preservation. Wednesday morning brought the mobile notary, an efficient woman in her 40s named Rita, who arrived with a portable scanner and a professional manner. Helen was there too, serving as witness along with one of the nurses. Evelyn signed the documents methodically. Durable power of attorney for healthcare and finance, naming Helen Porter as her agent, effective immediately. Revocation of all previous powers of attorney, specifically revoking any authority previously granted to Daniel Marks. Advance directive, specifying that Helen Porter was authorized to make medical decisions on her behalf if she became unable to make them herself. Rita notarized each signature, embossed each document with her seal, and provided certified copies. "These are legally binding as of now," Rita said, handing the documents to Helen. "File the originals in a secure location. Give copies to any relevant financial institutions, healthcare providers, and your attorney." After Rita left, Helen organized the documents into folders. "I'll take these home and put them in the safe. I'll also send copies to Margaret and start the process of notifying all your banks and investment companies." "Thank you," Evelyn said. She felt lighter somehow, despite the seriousness of what she'd just done. She had taken control. She had protected herself. Now she just needed to heal enough to go home. That afternoon, Dr. Cole stopped by during his rounds. He had a manila envelope in his hands. "Miss Marks," he said, "you requested copies of equipment logs related to your ventilator." "Yes." He handed her the envelope. "This is everything we have. Detailed logs from the monitoring system, including the event you asked about. I've also included my notes and the maintenance report." "Thank you." He hesitated at the door. "Can I ask why you need this?" Evelyn met his eyes. "I'm trying to understand what happened while I was here. I'm a detail-oriented person. I like to have complete records." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Dr. Cole nodded slowly. "If you have any concerns about your care or about any incidents during your stay, you should speak with patient services. They can investigate." "I'll keep that in mind." After he left, Evelyn opened the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. There were several pages of dense text, equipment settings, alarm logs, maintenance notes. She found the section Dr. Cole had highlighted. Ventilator monitoring log, Unit 12, Room 247B. Patient, Marks Evelyn, DOB, 05/12/1963, MRN, 47829991. Date, February 18, 2021. 14:37 and 9 seconds. Critical alert. Power interruption detected. Primary power source disconnected. Battery backup engaged, automatic. Ventilation status maintained. Patient oxygen saturation 98%, stable. Patient heart rate 79 BPM, stable. Alert notification sent to nurse's station. 14:37 and 12 seconds. Status update. Battery backup active. Estimated battery duration, 4 hours. Ventilation, continuous. 14:37 and 18 seconds, power restored. Primary power source, reconnected. Battery backup, disengaged, automatic. Return to normal operation, confirmed. Total interruption duration, 9 seconds. Patient impact, none. 14:45 and 33 seconds, maintenance note. Cause of interruption, undetermined. Possible factors, building power fluctuation, cord disruption, loose outlet connection. Action required, outlet inspection, cord examination. Priority, routine. Scheduled follow-up, week of February 22nd. Evelyn read it 3 times, her finger tracing the timestamps. 14:37 and 9 seconds. 9 seconds of disconnected power. 9 seconds during which her life had depended on a battery backup system. 9 seconds that could have been much longer if someone had disabled the backup. 9 seconds that could have ended her life if the machine had malfunctioned. But it hadn't. The system had worked. She had survived. She placed the document in her own folder, alongside the bank statements and the photograph. She labeled the folder medical records and tucked it into the bottom of her hospital bag. Evidence. Documentation. Truth. By the end of that week, Evelyn was strong enough for discharge. She could walk unassisted. She could climb stairs. She could manage her own medications. The doctors were satisfied with her progress. Helen came to pick her up on Friday morning, bringing fresh clothes, soft pants, a loose sweater, comfortable shoes, and helping her change in the small bathroom. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror for the first time in nearly a month. She looked thinner, older, fragile in a way she hadn't been before. But she was alive. They signed the discharge papers, collected the various instruction sheets and prescription notes, and made their way slowly to the elevator. Marisol was at the nurse's station and came over to say goodbye. "Take care of yourself," Marisol said, squeezing Evelyn's hand. "Come back and visit when you're feeling better." "I will," Evelyn said. And Marisol, "Thank you for everything, especially for paying attention." Marisol seemed to understand what she meant. "I'm glad you're okay." The ride home was quiet. Helen drove carefully, avoiding potholes and sudden stops. The city looked different to Evelyn, brighter, louder, more chaotic than she remembered. After a month in the regulated quiet of a hospital room, the world felt overwhelming. Her condo was on the 2nd floor of a 3-story building in Rogers Park. Helen helped her up the stairs, unlocked the door, and guided her inside. Everything was exactly as she'd left it on February 4th. The dishes in the drying rack. The book on the coffee table. The calendar on the wall still shows February, with her doctor's appointment marked on the 4th in blue ink. A lifetime ago. "Sit down," Helen said, guiding her to the couch. "I'll make tea." While Helen was in the kitchen, Evelyn looked around her living room. The furniture was old but comfortable. The walls had photos of her and Thomas, of Daniel at various ages, of places they'd traveled. A normal life. An ordinary life. A life that now felt precarious and uncertain. Helen brought tea and sat beside her. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Evelyn said honestly. "I'm glad to be home. But I also feel afraid." Of what? Of him. Of Daniel. Of what he might do. Helen was quiet for a moment. "He doesn't have keys to your apartment, does he?" "No. I never gave him a set." "Good. Keep it that way. And if he shows up unannounced, you don't have to let him in. He's my son. He's also someone who may have tried to hurt you." The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. Evelyn sipped her tea and thought about boundaries. About what she owed to family and what she owed to herself. About where love ended and self-preservation began. "I need to rest," she said finally. Helen helped her to the bedroom, made sure she had her medications and a glass of water within reach, and left with promises to check in later. Alone in her bedroom, Evelyn lay down on her own bed for the first time in a month. The mattress felt different from the hospital bed. Softer. More familiar. Home. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept circling back to the same questions. Had Daniel really tried to kill her? Or had it been an accident, a moment of clumsiness that happened to coincide with the photograph? And if it had been deliberate, what did that mean? What did you do when your own child became a threat? She didn't have answers. But she knew she needed to keep moving forward. Keep protecting herself. Keep gathering evidence. Because she wasn't done yet. By the start of March, spring was arriving in earnest. The snow had melted. The trees were beginning to bud. The temperature was climbing into the 40s and 50s, that tentative warmth that promised better days ahead. Evelyn established a new routine. Morning medications. Light breakfast. Short walks around the block, gradually increasing in distance. Afternoon rest. Physical therapy exercises. Healthy dinners. Early bedtimes. Helen visited every day, sometimes twice a day. She brought groceries. She cooked meals. She helped with errands. She managed phone calls and paperwork. And crucially, she fielded questions from Daniel. He called 3 times in the first week after Evelyn came home. Each time, Helen answered Evelyn's phone. They had agreed to this arrangement, and each time, she was polite but firm. She's resting. She's not taking calls right now. She'll reach out when she's feeling better. Daniel left messages. Brief ones at first, asking how she was doing. Then longer ones, more urgent, asking why she wasn't returning his calls. Then frustrated ones, demanding to know why Helen was controlling access to his mother. Evelyn listened to the messages but didn't respond. On March 10th, Margaret Sullivan called to say the will was ready for signing. Evelyn and Helen went to Margaret's office downtown, a modern building near the river, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. Margaret led them into a conference room and laid out the new will on the table. It was 22 pages long, dense with legal language and specific provisions. The key changes were straightforward. All assets to be placed in a trust upon Evelyn's death, with Helen as trustee and executor. Specific bequests: $10,000 to Marisol Vega, $20,000 to be split among several charitable organizations Evelyn had supported over the years, $50,000 to Helen for her years of friendship and support. The remainder, estimated at approximately $750,000, to be donated to a foundation supporting heart health research and patient advocacy. Daniel Marks was not mentioned anywhere in the document. Not as a beneficiary. Not as executor. Not as a contingent heir. Not even as next of kin to be notified. Are you sure about this? Margaret asked gently. Once we sign this and file it, this becomes your official will. If you pass away, this is how your estate will be distributed. Evelyn looked at the document. She thought about Daniel as a baby, as a boy, as a young man. She thought about all the years she'd supported him, all the money she'd given him, all the times she'd made excuses. And she thought about the photograph. The reflection in the window. The hand near the plug. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I'm sure, she said. She signed on every page where indicated. Margaret notarized it. Helen and Margaret's assistant served as witnesses. It was done. I'll file this with the county and keep the original in my vault, Margaret said. You'll have a copy for your records. And I'm noting in my files that this supersedes all previous wills and that it was signed while you were of sound mind and free from coercion. After they left the office, Helen drove Evelyn home in silence. They were almost back to Rogers Park when Evelyn finally spoke. Do you think I'm being cruel? No, Helen said immediately. I think you're being smart. He's my son. He's also someone who took $10,000 from you while you were unconscious and possibly tried to disconnect your life support. We don't know that for sure. We know enough, Helen said firmly. You have a photograph showing him near the equipment at the exact moment of a power failure. You have financial records showing unauthorized transfers. You have those authorization forms he tried to get you to sign that would have given him control of everything. The pattern is clear, Evelyn. You're not being cruel. You're being cautious. I still love him, Evelyn said quietly. I know. But you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with all the documentation spread out in front of her. Bank statements. The photograph. The ventilator log. The will. Everything organized in neat folders. She thought about going to the police. filing a formal complaint, pursuing criminal charges. But she also thought about what that would mean. Court hearings, testimony, publicity, the public shame of accusing her own son of trying to kill her. And what would be the outcome? At best, he might face charges for the financial theft. But proving he deliberately unplugged the ventilator would be nearly impossible. The photograph showed proximity, not action. The timing was suspicious, but not conclusive. Any competent defense attorney would argue it was circumstantial. She might go through all of that and still lose. And in the process, destroy whatever relationship remained between them. Not that much remained anyway. She gathered all the documents and placed them in a large manila envelope. She sealed it and wrote on the outside, "Important legal documents, in case of emergency." Then she put it in the back of her bedroom closet, behind the boxes of tax returns and winter clothes. She hoped she'd never need it. But she kept it anyway. The weeks passed. March turned into April. The weather warmed. Flowers bloomed in the neighborhood gardens. Evelyn grew stronger day by day. Daniel called less frequently. Once a week, then once every 2 weeks. The messages became shorter, less urgent. He was backing off, she realized. Maybe accepting that she'd established boundaries. Maybe moving on to other concerns. Or maybe planning something else. She tried not to think about that. On April 20th, something happened. Evelyn was checking her email when she saw a fraud alert from her bank. Someone had attempted to log into her primary checking account at 3:15 that morning. The username entered was Daniel's old authorized user ID. The system had recognized it as deactivated and locked the account automatically. Evelyn immediately called Helen. "He tried to access my account," she said. "Last night, 3 in the morning. "I'll handle it," Helen said. "I'm initiating a formal fraud complaint with the bank right now." Within an hour, Helen had filed reports with all 3 credit bureaus, placed fraud alerts on Evelyn's accounts, and notified Margaret Sullivan. By that evening, Margaret had sent a formal cease and desist letter to Daniel's last known address, instructing him to stop all attempts to access Evelyn's financial accounts and warning that further attempts would result in legal action. The next day, Evelyn's phone rang. Daniel's name on the screen. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. "Hello," she said, her voice careful and neutral. "Mom," his voice was tight, controlled, angry. "Did you report me to the bank?" "I didn't report you." The bank's fraud detection system flagged an unauthorized login attempt. "They're required to investigate." "I wasn't trying to steal from you. I was just checking to make sure your accounts were okay." At 3 in the morning. He didn't answer right away. Then, "I couldn't sleep. I was worried." "About what?" "About you. About your health. About making sure everything was being managed properly." "Helen is managing everything," Evelyn said. "You know that." "I'm your son," Daniel said, his voice rising. "I should be involved. Not some neighbor. Helen is my power of attorney. She has legal authority. You don't. Because you took it away. Because I needed someone I could trust," Evelyn said quietly. Silence on the line. Heavy and charged. "What is that supposed to mean?" Daniel asked, but his voice had changed. Become guarded. Evelyn took a breath. She hadn't planned to have this conversation over the phone. She hadn't planned to have it at all. But now that they were here, she couldn't stop herself. "I know about the transfers," she said. "The $10,000 you took while I was in the hospital. I told you. That was for your bills. My bills were already paid. And your memo said care services and final payment." "Care services for what, Daniel?" "Final payment for what?" He didn't answer. "And I have something else," Evelyn continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "A photograph. Taken on February 18th at 2:37 p.m. showing you standing next to my ventilator. With your hand near the power cord." At the exact moment the machine lost power. She heard his breath catch. Heard the moment of realization. "That was an accident," he said finally. "I bumped it." "Did you?" "Yes. I didn't mean to. I was standing there and I must have knocked against it or something." "The log says the power was out for 9 seconds, Evelyn said. "That's a long time to just bump something." "I don't know. Maybe it was loose. Maybe it was barely connected, and I barely touched it and it came out. I don't know, Mom. But it wasn't deliberate. Wasn't it? No. Jesus Christ, what are you suggesting? That I tried to kill you? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. The word hung in the air between them, terrible and unspoken until now. I'm suggesting, she said carefully, that I was vulnerable. That I had significant financial assets. That those assets would have come to you if I died. And that there were several suspicious incidents, financial transfers while I was unconscious, attempts to get me to sign authorization forms, presence near my medical equipment at the exact moment of a malfunction. I can't believe you're saying this, Daniel said. His voice was different now. Not angry anymore. Almost broken. I'm your son. I would never. Then explain the memo, Evelyn interrupted. Explain final payment. What was final about it? Silence. I can't do this, Daniel said finally. I can't keep defending myself to my own mother. I tried to help you. I tried to be there for you. And this is what I get? Accusations? Being locked out of your accounts? Being written out of your life? How did you know about that? Evelyn asked sharply. About being written out. More silence. Then, I didn't. But you just confirmed it. Evelyn's chest tightened. She'd revealed more than she intended. I need you to stay away from my finances, she said. And I need you to respect the boundaries I've set. If you can't do that, we can't have a relationship. Fine, Daniel said. His voice was cold now. Distant. Have it your way. I'm done trying. He hung up. Evelyn sat holding the phone for a long time afterward, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. She had confronted him. She had spoken the truth out loud. And he had lied. Or had he? Was it possible it really had been an accident? Was she being paranoid, seeing malice where there was only clumsiness and bad timing? She didn't know. But she knew this. The doubt itself was corrosive. The uncertainty poisoned everything. Whether he'd actually tried to hurt her or not, the fact that she couldn't trust him was enough. The relationship was broken. Maybe irreparably. She called Helen and told her what had happened. You did the right thing, Helen said. Confronting him was brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt awful. I know. But it needed to happen. What do I do now? Now you keep living your life. You keep getting stronger. You keep protecting yourself. And you let him make his own choices about how he responds. That night, Evelyn barely slept. She lay awake replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, looking for clues to the truth. But the truth remained elusive. By May, the phone calls stopped completely. Daniel didn't call, didn't text, didn't email. He had withdrawn entirely, and Evelyn didn't know whether to feel relieved or heartbroken. Both, probably. Life continued in its new pattern. Helen managed the finances. Evelyn attended follow-up appointments with Dr. Cole, who pronounced himself satisfied with her recovery. She walked further each day, building endurance. She returned to volunteering at the food bank, though only for short shifts. She learned to live with uncertainty, to accept that she might never know for sure what had happened on February 18th. To make peace with the protective measures she'd taken even if they were based on suspicion rather than proof. In early June, Margaret Sullivan called with news. The Illinois Department of Public Health completed their review of St. Luke's patient safety protocols, Margaret said. They found several areas for improvement regarding visitor access to medical equipment in critical care settings. The hospital has implemented new policies. Did they identify what happened with my ventilator? They didn't release specific details. But they noted that they'd reviewed several incidents of equipment anomalies during visitor hours and determined that enhanced monitoring was needed. I think your anonymous report contributed to that. So something did happen. Yes. But they're treating it as a systemic issue rather than an individual incident. Which protects you from being identified, but also means no specific action was taken against any individual visitor. Evelyn processed this. Daniel wouldn't face consequences. But the hospital had changed its policies, which meant future patients would be safer. It felt like incomplete justice. But it was something. Thank you for letting me know, Evelyn said. Summer arrived. The days were long and warm. Evelyn spent time in the small courtyard behind her building, reading in the sunshine, feeling her body slowly remember what health felt like. She thought about Daniel less frequently now. The acute pain had faded to a dull ache, something she carried, but that no longer defined her days. She thought about what Helen had said, you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. It was true. She did still love him. But she also accepted that love from a distance was the only safe option. By September, 6 months had passed since the heart attack. Evelyn felt stronger than she had in years, ironic, given that she'd nearly died. But the experience had changed her, made her more intentional, more boundaried, more willing to prioritize her own well-being. She continued her routines. Walks, volunteering, weekly coffee with Helen, monthly checkups with Dr. Cole, quiet evenings reading or watching television. It was a simple life, but it was hers. In October, she received a card in the mail. The return address was from Marisol Vega. Inside, in careful handwriting, "Dear Miss Marks, I think about you often. I'm glad you're doing well. I wanted you to know that because of that incident, the hospital changed its visitor policies. We now have cameras in all critical care rooms and staff monitor equipment more closely during visitor hours. I think your experience helped protect other patients. I'm also leaving nursing. I've taken a job with the state health department as a patient safety advocate. I'll be investigating complaints and helping improve hospital protocols. Thank you for showing me how important it is to pay attention. Take care, Marisol." Evelyn read the note 3 times. Then she wrote back, "Dear Marisol, your mistake saved my life. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because you paid attention. Because you kept the photograph. Because you were willing to document what you saw even when it was uncomfortable. Thank you for moving into advocacy work. Patients need people like you, people who notice, who care, who act. I'm doing well. I'm safe. And I'm grateful. With deep appreciation, Evelyn." She mailed the card and felt something settle in her chest. A sense of completion. Of having come through something terrible and emerged changed but intact. By the end of the year, Evelyn had made a decision. The condo held too many memories of Thomas, of Daniel, of the life she'd had before. She needed something new. Something that was just hers. She put the condo on the market in January. It sold quickly for $320,000, more than she'd expected. She used the money to buy a smaller, one-bedroom apartment in a building near Lake Michigan, in a neighborhood she'd always loved. The new apartment had large windows and good light. It was on the 3rd floor, with a view of the water. It felt clean and fresh and full of possibility. Helen helped her move, helped her pack up 30 years of accumulated possessions, helped her decide what to keep and what to let go. Evelyn kept the important things. Photos of Thomas. A few favorite books. Her grandmother's quilt. The practical necessities of daily life. She let go of most of the rest. The furniture went to charity. Clothes were donated. Old tax returns were shredded. The accumulation of decades reduced to a few boxes and suitcases. It felt liberating. In the new apartment, she started over. New furniture, simple and functional. New routines. New neighbors to meet. A new view to wake up to every morning. She kept plants on the windowsill, succulents and ferns, things that didn't require much care but brought life to the space. And she kept 2 things framed on the wall beside the window, Marisol's card and Helen's quote that had become a kind of mantra: "You can love someone and still protect yourself from them." She looked at these reminders every morning. They grounded her, reminded her of the journey she'd taken from vulnerability to strength. 2 years passed. Evelyn was 60 now. Her health was stable. Her finances were secure. Her life was quiet and orderly and entirely her own. She never heard from Daniel. She didn't know where he was or how he was doing. She had tried searching for him online once, but found nothing recent. An old business registration. A mention in a neighborhood forum from years ago. Nothing current. She told herself she didn't need to know. That his life was his own and hers was hers, and they had chosen different paths. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered. Was he okay? Had he found stability? Did he ever think about her? She would never know. And she had learned to be okay with that uncertainty. One afternoon in March, 3 years almost to the day since her discharge from the hospital, Evelyn received a letter from an attorney's office she didn't recognize. She opened it carefully. "Dear Ms. Marks, I am writing to inform you that Daniel Marks passed away on March 3rd. As his mother and closest surviving relative, you are being notified of his death. There is no estate to settle, no assets, no debts that require family action or involvement." He had specified in a brief handwritten note that his ashes should be scattered in Lake Michigan, but made no formal arrangements or provisions for this to be carried out. If you would like to claim his remains, please contact our office within 30 days. Otherwise, the county will handle final disposition according to standard procedures. Please accept our condolences for your loss. Sincerely, Robert Chin, ESQ. Cook County Public Administrator's Office. Evelyn read the letter 3 times. Then she set it down on the kitchen table and stared out the window at the lake. Daniel was dead. She waited for the grief to hit. The overwhelming sadness. The regret. The what-ifs that would surely come. But what she felt instead was something quieter and more complex. Sadness, yes, but also relief. And something that felt almost like peace. He was gone. Whatever had happened between them, whatever he had done or not done, whatever intentions he'd had, none of it mattered anymore. He couldn't hurt her now. Couldn't access her accounts. Couldn't manipulate or pressure or threaten. She was safe. Finally and completely safe. The thought made her feel guilty. What kind of mother feels relief at her child's death? But she did. And she accepted that about herself. She called Helen. "He died," she said simply. "Daniel." Helen was quiet for a moment. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Sad. Relieved. Empty. All of it. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes." Helen arrived 20 minutes later with tea and quiet company. They sat together by the window, watching the light move across the water. "The letter says he wanted his ashes scattered in the lake," Evelyn said. "But he made no arrangements. Do you want to do it?" Evelyn thought about it for a long time. "Yes, but not in the lake. Somewhere else. Somewhere that feels, I don't know, appropriate." A week later, Evelyn and Helen drove north to a forest preserve where Evelyn and Thomas used to take Daniel hiking when he was young. It was a quiet place, full of old oaks and pine trees, with trails that wound through woods and meadows. They walked to a clearing Evelyn remembered, a small open space surrounded by tall trees, with dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Evelyn opened the simple ceramic urn the county had provided and poured the ashes onto the ground. They were gray and coarse, the remnants of a life. "I loved you," she said quietly, speaking to the ashes, to Daniel, to the memory of her son. "I always loved you. But I couldn't save you. I couldn't fix you. I could only protect myself. And I'm sorry that's how it had to be." She stood there for a long moment, Helen beside her, the wind moving through the trees. Then they walked back to the car and drove home. That night, Evelyn sat by her window with a cup of tea and thought about her life. Thomas, gone 17 years now. About Daniel, gone now too. About the family she'd had and lost. And about the life she'd built anyway. The friendships. The routines. The quiet satisfactions of days well lived. She thought about the photograph that had started everything. The accidental image that had revealed a truth she hadn't wanted to see. She had destroyed it years ago, shredded it and thrown it away, but the memory remained. She had learned something from all of it. About trust. About boundaries. About the difference between love and enabling. About the necessity of protecting yourself even when it hurt. She pulled out a small notepad and wrote something down, a thought that had been forming in her mind for months. The smallest things matter. A photograph. A timestamp. The courage to pay attention. The willingness to protect yourself. The grace to let go. She taped the note to the frame beside Marisol's card and Helen's quote. 3 reminders. 3 truths she had learned the hard way. Then she turned off the light and went to bed. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the window. She made coffee. She watered her plants. She called Helen to make plans for lunch. She lived her life. Because that's what survivors do. They keep going. They build new routines. They find peace in small moments. They protect what matters. And years later, when people asked about her son, she would smile gently and say, "Some relationships don't have neat endings. But I made peace with it." And that was the truth. She had made peace. Not through reconciliation. Not through forgiveness in the traditional sense. But through acceptance. Through boundaries. Through the understanding that loving someone didn't mean allowing them to hurt you. Through the knowledge that protecting yourself was not a betrayal, it was wisdom. She shared this wisdom with others who needed it. She volunteered with an elder advocacy group, teaching financial literacy classes, helping seniors recognize signs of exploitation, sharing her story in vague terms as a cautionary tale. "Someone I trusted took advantage of me when I was vulnerable," she would tell groups of attentive seniors. "I didn't see it at first because I didn't want to believe it. But once I had evidence, I acted. I protected myself. And I'm here today because I did." People would thank her afterward. Tell their own stories. Ask for advice. She became known in the community as someone who understood these issues. Someone who had lived through financial exploitation and survived. Someone who could help others navigate the complicated terrain of family, money, and trust. It gave her purpose. It made meaning from her pain. And it reminded her over and over that she had done the right thing. 5 years after the heart attack, Evelyn was 63. Her health was good. She walked 3 miles every morning along the lakefront. She ate well, took her medications religiously, and saw Dr. Cole every 6 months for checkups. She had outlived her son. The thought still felt strange sometimes, counter to the natural order of things. But she had outlived him. And she had done it by being careful. By paying attention. By protecting herself when it mattered most. She kept the manila envelope in her closet for another 2 years before finally throwing it away. The bank statements. The ventilator logs. The documentation she had gathered so carefully. She didn't need it anymore. There was no one to prove anything to. No one left to protect herself against. She shredded it all and threw it in the recycling. The only thing she kept was Marisol's note, Helen's quote, and her own reminder about small things mattering. These remained framed on her windowsill, where the morning light would catch them. By the time she was 65, Evelyn had built a life she was proud of. Not the life she'd imagined when she was young. That life had included Thomas growing old beside her, Daniel finding success and stability, grandchildren she would never have. But a good life nonetheless. A life of intention and purpose. A life of boundaries and self-respect. A life that was entirely, completely, safely her own. She woke each morning grateful to be alive. She watched the sun rise over the lake. She watered her plants and drank her coffee and planned her day. She called Helen, who remained her closest friend and staunchest ally. She volunteered and read and walked and lived. And sometimes, when the light was right and the wind was calm and the water was still, she would think about that moment. February 18th, 2:37 p.m. 9 seconds when her life had hung in the balance. 9 seconds that could have ended everything. But I hadn't. 9 seconds that had instead become the beginning of something else. A different life. A harder one piece. A deeper understanding of what it meant to survive. She would think about Marisol's words, "Sometimes accidents are just timing doing what conscience can't." She would think about the photograph that was never meant to exist, the documentation that had saved her, the small mistake that had revealed a terrible truth. And she would think, "I'm still here. Despite everything. Against all odds. I'm still here." The house was quiet. The lake was calm. And Evelyn Marks, survivor, protector of her own peace, keeper of difficult truths, lived on. She lived on with intention and care, with boundaries firmly in place, with love redefined as something that could exist alongside self-protection. She lived on because she had learned the most important lesson, that surviving sometimes meant accepting difficult truths, that protecting yourself was not cruelty, and that peace was possible even after betrayal. She lived on because she had chosen herself. Finally and completely and without apology. And that choice, made in a hospital room in the winter of 2021, had saved her life in more ways than one. The photograph was gone. The evidence was destroyed. The threat had passed. But the lesson remained. And Evelyn Marks, at 65, at 70, at 75, for all the years that followed, carried that lesson with her. She taught it to others. She lived it every day. She made it the foundation of her new life. And she never, ever regretted it. The smallest things matter. A photograph. A timestamp. The courage to pay attention. The willingness to protect yourself. The grace to let go. And the wisdom to keep living fully and completely on your own terms. This was her story. This was her survival. This was her truth. And it was enough. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.